wreck is unique in the fact that under the microscope, the features in them are extremely detailed.
The team deploys an ROV to capture thousands of digital images of every point on the wreck. Banks of computers crunch the raw data, turning millions of sonar points into a complex model of the wreck.
In 2025, a deep-sea drone descended into the Titanic on what was supposed to be a routine mapping mission. But 3 hours into the dive, the sensors picked up something that made the entire control room go silent. A rhythmic pulse. Coming from deep inside the ship, it repeated every 3 seconds, steady, mechanical, like a heartbeat echoing through metal. The crew tried recalibrating the equipment. They ran diagnostics. They checked for interference, but the signal didn't stop. It kept pulsing for 9 straight hours without a single variation. Now here's the thing. The Titanic has been sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic for 113 years.
The Titanic has been hidden in darkness at the bottom of the Atlantic.
At 12,500 feet, the pressure exceeds 6,000 pounds per square inch. The temperature hovers near freezing. Salt water corrodes metal within months. Nothing mechanical should function down there. Nothing should move. And yet something was. When the drone followed that signal into a section of the wreck no human has ever seen, what it found behind a sealed door left even the most experienced scientists shaken. A skeleton sitting upright in a chair, and in its hand, a gold object that was still moving. But here's where it gets stranger. Someone else had detected this same signal 40 years ago, and they were ordered to stay silent about it. The expedition began aboard the research vessel Alethea, a state-of-the-art ship stationed in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. The team was part of Project Abyssal Echo, a collaboration between oceanographers, engineers, and AI researchers with one goal: capture the most detailed images ever taken of the Titanic before it disappears forever. Because the wreck is dying. Scientists have known for years that the ship is deteriorating at an alarming rate. Entire sections have already crumbled. The bow is collapsing inward. Rusticles, those strange icicle-like formations created by iron-eating bacteria, are consuming the hull piece by piece. Some estimates suggest the wreck is losing hundreds of pounds of iron every single day. Within a few decades, experts believe there will be nothing left but a rust stain on the ocean floor. This expedition was supposed to be a race against time, a final attempt to preserve history before the Atlantic swallows it completely. At the center of their operation was Nereus X, an underwater drone unlike anything used before, built from pressure-resistant titanium.
Okay, Tim.
First thing is the pressure hull, which is made of titanium. The hull is about 19 millimeters thick.
And equipped with artificial intelligence that could navigate debris fields without human guidance. Its sensors were sensitive enough to detect vibrations smaller than a whisper. Its cameras could capture details invisible to the naked eye. The kind of technology that makes you wonder what else might be possible in the deep. The first descent went smoothly. Nereus X moved silently through the darkness, sending back crystal-clear images of rusted corridors and fallen beams. The footage was stunning. Collapsed stairwells, the ghostly remains of chandeliers still hanging in what was once the grandest ballroom on any ship. Shoes scattered across the sea floor, still holding the shape of feet that once wore them.
A lot of shoes were found in pairs on the ocean bed, and they thought how extraordinary it is.
For the first time, the world was seeing the Titanic in unprecedented detail. Then, on the second dive, everything changed. The sonar started showing rhythmic pulses coming from deep inside the stern section of the ship. The pattern was precise, every 3 seconds. No variation, no interruption. At first, the control room assumed it was background noise, maybe a reflection of the drone's own signal bouncing off metal surfaces. Equipment at those depths often produces strange readings, but when technicians recalibrated the equipment, the readings stayed exactly the same. The signal wasn't random. It wasn't coming from the water. It was coming from inside the Titanic. When they amplified the audio and played it through the speakers, the entire crew fell silent. It sounded like a heartbeat, a soft, steady thump, echoing through twisted metal. One of the engineers removed his headset and looked around the room. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was even breathing. Every pair of eyes stared at the monitor, where green waves on the screen rose and fell in perfect rhythm. The drone's AI recalculated its route and began moving toward the source. But here's what made the team uneasy. The signal was leading them into the stern section, the most dangerous part of the wreck. When the Titanic broke apart during its final plunge, the stern spiraled downward and slammed into the seafloor with catastrophic force. Decks pancaked on top of each other, walls collapsed inward. What remains is a twisted labyrinth of crushed metal that has never been fully explored. Previous expeditions had avoided this area entirely. The risk of losing equipment was too high. Even small vibrations could cause entire walls to collapse. But something inside that maze was pulsing, and the team had to know what it was. No one spoke as Nereus X navigated deeper into the wreck. The drone's floodlights cut through clouds of sediment and rust particles that swirled like underwater snow. For nearly an hour, the feed showed nothing but destruction. Bent railings, shattered portholes, unrecognizable fragments of what had once been one of the most luxurious vessels ever built. Personal items scattered across the debris field, a leather bag rotting into the sediment, what remained of a coat hanging on a door frame like a ghost waiting to be claimed. The team watched every movement on their screens, tense and alert. If the drone's lights failed or its frame got caught on jagged steel, they would lose it forever. Every meter forward increased the risk. The AI was making constant micro-adjustments, plotting paths around dangling cables and collapsed beams. The machine moved slowly, almost cautiously, as if it sensed the danger surrounding it. Then the sonar detected something unexpected. Ahead of the drone, hidden behind a wall of collapsed beams, was a structure that appeared intact. Not just intact, sealed. The readings indicated a door, still closed, still holding after more than a century underwater. The control room erupted with whispered speculation. How was that possible? The pressure at that depth is immense. Any air pocket should have been crushed within hours of the sinking. And yet the sensors showed a distinct boundary, a space where water had not penetrated. The chamber behind it seemed airtight. No one could understand how that was possible. The mission commander gave the order to proceed. Nereus X maneuvered through a narrow gap in the debris and emerged into a corridor that looked almost preserved. The walls were coated in thick orange rust, but their shape was still recognizable. This had once been part of the officers' quarters, a restricted section where only senior crew members were allowed, an area that no diver or camera had ever entered since the 1985 expedition first found the wreck. At the end of the corridor stood the door, heavy brass, now blackened by decades of chemical reaction with seawater. But unlike everything else in the wreck, it was still standing, still closed. A small window near the top was completely opaque, covered in mineral deposits that the drone's lights could not penetrate. The vibration sensors spiked. The rhythmic pulse was stronger here. Whatever was generating that signal was behind this door. The drone extended its mechanical arm and reached for the handle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that echoed through the audio feed, the door began to move. What waited on the other side had been hidden for 113 years.
Today marks 113 years since the Titanic sank in the icy waters of the North Atlantic.
The door swung inward slowly, releasing a cloud of particles that had been trapped for over a century. The cameras adjusted automatically, filtering through the haze as floodlights illuminated what lay beyond. The control room went completely silent. There, in the center of a small cabin, sat a human skeleton. It was positioned upright in a wooden chair, facing the door as if waiting for someone to enter. The bones were remarkably intact, held together by remnants of clothing that had somehow resisted complete decay. A dark coat still draped over the shoulders. Fragments of a white shirt clung to the rib cage. One boot remained on the left foot, resting against the floor. But it was the position that disturbed the crew most. The skeleton wasn't slumped or collapsed like the other remains found throughout the wreck. It was sitting deliberately, almost formally, both hands resting on the armrests of the chair. The scene was so well preserved that for a moment the crew thought it was a mannequin or artifact, and in the right hand, clutched between bony fingers, was a gold pocket watch. The drone moved closer. Its cameras zoomed in on the object. The casing was ornate, decorated with engravings still visible despite a thin layer of mineral buildup. A small chain dangled from the top, disappearing into what remained of the figure's coat pocket. Then someone in the control room noticed something impossible. The watch was moving. Not the whole object, just the mechanism inside. Through the glass face, the crew could see a small wheel oscillating back and forth in a precise rhythmic motion. It was the same rhythm they had been tracking for days, the same pulse that had led them here. The watch was still ticking. Pandemonium erupted on the ship. Engineers shouted over each other, demanding explanations. Scientists scrambled to verify the footage, convinced it had to be a visual glitch. Some thought it was a trick of the light. Others ran diagnostic checks. But every test came back the same. The movement was real. The signal was emanating directly from the object in the skeleton's hand. The discovery sent the team scrambling for answers. But the more they researched, the more disturbing the situation became. When the footage reached land, researchers started comparing the location of the sealed chamber to old expedition maps. What they found linked the discovery to a section that Robert Ballard himself had never revealed to the public.
Well, actually, the Titanic was a cover for a top-secret military operation I was doing.
Ballard was the oceanographer who first discovered the Titanic in 1985. His work made him a legend in marine exploration. But as the scientists soon learned, Ballard's own expedition logs were not as complete as history suggested. When data from Nereus X was compared to Ballard's original charts, something strange appeared. Several coordinates from his 1985 maps were missing. Entire sections of the stern, including the exact area where the new drone had found the sealed chamber, were left blank. At first, some thought it was a simple technical issue from older equipment, but then the team noticed abrupt breaks in the sonar lines, as if certain areas had been deliberately cut out. Here's where it gets more unsettling. Decades after the original discovery, declassified Navy documents revealed a stunning truth. Ballard's famous expedition had been funded by the United States military. And finding the Titanic had never been his primary mission. The real objective was to secretly investigate two nuclear submarines that had sunk during the Cold War, the USS Thresher and the USS Scorpion. Both were resting on the Atlantic seafloor, and the Navy wanted to know if their nuclear reactors were leaking radiation. They needed someone to scan those wrecks without raising international suspicion. The Titanic search was a cover story, a way to explain why an American research vessel was spending weeks scanning the deep Atlantic without attracting attention from Soviet intelligence. Ballard was given a deal: complete the submarine inspections first, and whatever time remained could be used to search for the Titanic. He had just 12 days. Against all odds, he found the ship and became a legend in the process. But the declassified files contained something else, something that had been redacted from every public report for 40 years. During the 1985 expedition, Ballard's sonar equipment recorded an anomaly near the stern section of the wreck. The official logs described it as an unresolved signal return and marked it for further investigation. That investigation never happened. The files showed that naval officers present on the expedition ordered all data related to the anomaly to be classified. When the 2025 team compared their own readings to those 40-year-old records, the match was undeniable. The coordinates were nearly identical. The frequency patterns were the same. Whatever Ballard's equipment had detected in 1985 was the same phenomenon their drone had just rediscovered. Former members of Ballard's original crew were contacted. Most refused to speak, but two technicians, now in their 70s, agreed to share what they remembered. Both described a tense atmosphere during the final days of the expedition. They recalled Ballard having heated arguments with Navy representatives aboard the ship. One technician remembered seeing photographs being confiscated and placed in sealed containers. The other recalled Ballard returning from a private briefing, looking shaken, refusing to discuss what he had seen. Years later, Ballard made a cryptic statement that had puzzled historians ever since. He said that when he found the Titanic, he realized some doors are better left closed, that not everything down there is meant to be disturbed. At the time, most assumed he was speaking about respecting human remains, a call for dignity. But in light of the 2025 discovery, those words took on a completely different meaning. Ballard had found the sealed chamber. He had detected the same impossible signal. And for reasons that may have involved national security, scientific disbelief, or something far more disturbing, he chose to say nothing. Back aboard the Alethea, the crew worked through the night. Sleep was impossible. Every scientist, engineer, and technician was consumed by the same question. How could a mechanical device still function after 113 years at the bottom of the ocean? The conditions at that depth are brutal beyond imagination. Water temperature hovers just above freezing. Pressure exceeds 6,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a submarine like an aluminum can. Salt water corrodes metal within months. Organic material disintegrates within years. Nothing survives down there. Nothing should still be moving. And yet the footage was undeniable. Frame-by-frame analysis confirmed that the balance wheel inside that watch was oscillating every 3 seconds, without variation, without stopping, with the kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker jealous. The team began proposing theories. The first explanation focused on the sealed chamber itself. If the room had remained airtight since the sinking, the environment inside would be radically different from the rest of the wreck. Without saltwater exposure, corrosion would slow dramatically. Without pressure equalization, delicate mechanisms might survive intact. But even this couldn't explain ongoing movement. A sealed chamber might preserve an object, but it couldn't power one. For the watch to still be ticking, it needed energy, and there was no apparent source. The second theory involved thermodynamics. The temperature inside the chamber was slightly higher than the surrounding water. Some scientists suggested this differential could create microcurrents of air, generating just enough force to move extremely light components. If the balance wheel was delicate enough, these tiny currents might keep it oscillating indefinitely. Others were skeptical. The motion was too consistent, too rhythmic. Natural phenomena don't behave with that kind of precision. A third hypothesis came from the biologists. They pointed to Halomonas titanicae, a bacteria discovered living on the Titanic's hull. These microorganisms consume iron and create rusticles. As they feed and grow, they expand and contract in cycles. Could colonies of this bacteria have infiltrated the watch mechanism? Could their biological rhythm be causing movement that appeared mechanical? It was creative, but the timing didn't match. Bacterial growth cycles occur over days or weeks, not seconds. Then the engineering team offered the most disturbing possibility. They analyzed electromagnetic readings captured by the drone and found something unexpected. The object wasn't just vibrating, it was emitting a faint but measurable signal. Not just physical oscillation, actual electromagnetic pulses broadcasting outward from the device. This changed everything. A simple pocket watch doesn't emit radiation. Gears and springs are passive components. They don't generate signals. For the object to be transmitting, it would need to contain something more. Circuitry, a power cell, or technology that officially didn't exist in 1912. The lead engineer pulled up enhanced imaging scans and zoomed in on the watch casing. What he showed the team sent a chill through the room. Beneath the decorative exterior, barely visible through layers of mineral deposits, were thin lines running in geometric patterns. They weren't cracks. They weren't corrosion damage. They were too precise, too symmetrical. They looked like wires. The object in that skeleton's hand wasn't just a timepiece. It was something far more complex. The discovery sent the team down a rabbit hole of historical investigation that would consume them for days. If the object contained wiring and circuitry, it wasn't a pocket watch. It was something else entirely, something that shouldn't have existed in 1912. The team needed to understand what they were looking at and who could have possibly built it. They started with the Titanic's cargo manifests. The ship had been carrying an extraordinary collection of valuables on its maiden voyage.
It told me how to find the Titanic. When the Thresher and the Scorpion imploded, all these pieces.
Wealthy passengers brought jewelry, fine art, personal treasures worth fortunes. The cargo holds contained everything, from automobiles to rare wines to cases of ostrich feathers destined for fashion houses in New York. But nowhere in the official records was there any mention of experimental equipment, scientific instruments, or prototype technology. If this device had been aboard, it wasn't listed. Someone had smuggled it onto the ship. The early 20th century was a period of explosive innovation, the kind of era where the impossible became possible almost overnight. Nikola Tesla was conducting experiments with wireless energy transmission. Guglielmo Marconi had recently demonstrated long-range radio communication. Engineers across Europe and America were racing to develop new ways to send signals across vast distances. Much of this research was conducted in secret. Governments understood the military potential of wireless communication. Whoever controlled the airwaves would have an enormous strategic advantage. Patents were filed under false names. Laboratories operated without public knowledge. Prototypes disappeared into classified archives, never to be seen again. Could someone have been using the Titanic to transport an experimental device?
Titanic has their own story of seeing it for the first time. And probably the most frequently asked question to me.
The ship's maiden voyage would have been the perfect cover. Thousands of passengers, mountains of luggage, minimal inspection. The team dug deeper into passenger records, searching for anyone with connections to electrical engineering or experimental physics. They cross-referenced names with scientific journals, patent filings, and government archives from the era. One passenger in particular drew their attention. His name appeared in the manifest, but his occupation was listed only as gentleman. No profession, no company affiliation, no stated reason for traveling to America. His cabin was located in the stern section near the officers' quarters, exactly where the sealed chamber had been found. When researchers cross-referenced his name with historical archives, they discovered something chilling. 6 months before the Titanic sailed, this man had been mentioned in a letter between two scientists discussing a prototype resonance transmitter, a device theoretically capable of sending signals through water using low-frequency vibrations. The letter described the device as unstable, potentially dangerous. It warned that the oscillations could interfere with nearby instruments and might even affect the structural integrity of metal objects if the frequency was calibrated incorrectly. The implications were terrifying. If that device had been activated during the voyage, intentionally or by accident, could it have affected the ship's navigation equipment? Could it have interfered with the telegraph system that failed to relay ice warnings? Could this hidden technology have played a role in the Titanic's doom?
Titanic clearly would have passed on its way to the big monster iceberg.
But the engineers were focused on something more immediate. The device was still active, still transmitting after more than a century. Whatever power source kept it alive showed no signs of depleting. During a final drone survey, a technician noticed something chilling. When Nereus X's sonar pinged the chamber, the device's signal shifted. The frequency changed by a fraction of a hertz. The rhythm stuttered before resuming its steady pulse. It was reacting. The ship's physicist ran calculations through the night. His conclusions were grim. If the device was a resonance transmitter operating in delicate equilibrium, any disruption could trigger a malfunction. The sealed chamber contained trapped gases, hydrogen or methane, from decades of decomposition. If the device destabilized and generated heat, it could ignite everything: the skeleton, the device, the last evidence of whatever secret had been buried there. The mission commander made the call. Nereus X would withdraw. The chamber would remain sealed. But as the drone ascended, its cameras captured one final image. The skeletal hand holding the device had moved. It was subtle, barely perceptible. But when the team compared the footage frame by frame, the evidence was undeniable. The fingers had shifted, as if tightening their grip on the object they had protected for over a century, as if the figure in the chair knew it was being watched. Some crew members refused to look at the footage again. Others couldn't stop watching it. In the weeks that followed, experts analyzed the footage from every possible angle. Debates raged in scientific communities. Government agencies requested access to the data. Several were quietly denied. The footage was classified before most of the public even knew it existed. Ballard, when shown the discovery, offered only a few words. He said he'd told them years ago, some doors should stay closed. The Titanic isn't just a frozen tomb at the bottom of the Atlantic. Something inside that wreck is still alive, still pulsing, still transmitting a signal that has been running for 113 years without stopping. And now that it's been found, the question isn't just what that device was built to do. It's whether anyone should ever go back to find out. Thanks for watching. If this left you unsettled, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. See you in the next one.